The restaurant was filled with the sound of cutlery clinking against fine china, low laughter and soft piano music drifting through the air. Crystal chandeliers glowed above tables where people ordered food without looking at prices. This was the kind of place where leftovers didn't exist. Not because plates were empty, but because food was disposable. At one corner table sat a man dressed simply. No flashy suit, no security, just calm eyes and a quiet presence. Ozzy Osbourne. He had barely touched his food when a shadow stopped beside his table. A waiter stood there, hands clasped tightly in front of him. His uniform was clean but worn. His shoulders sagged, not from work, but from life. He hesitated, swallowed hard, and spoke so softly that at first, Ozzy almost didn't hear him. "Sir, I'm sorry to bother you." Ozzy looked up. "It's okay." The waiter glanced around, making sure no one important was watching. His voice trembled. "Sir, may I take the leftovers for my daughter?" The words hung in the air like a dropped glass. Nearby conversation slowed. A woman paused mid-sip of her wine. A man frowned, annoyed by the interruption. A few diners exchanged looks. Some curious, some judgmental. The waiter rushed to explain, panic creeping into his voice. "She's sick. She's been sick. I didn't mean to offend you. If it's not allowed, I understand." Before Ozzy could respond, a sharp voice cut through the room. "What is going on here?" The restaurant manager had arrived. Crisp suit, cold eyes, authority dripping from every word. "Are you begging customers now?" he snapped. "This is a fine dining establishment, not a shelter." The waiter's face turned red. "Sir, I was just..." "Ina," the manager said loudly. "Go back to work immediately." Silence spread across the room, thick, uncomfortable silence. The waiter lowered his head. His hands shook as he whispered, "I'm sorry, sir." Not just to the manager, but to Ozzy. Ozzy said nothing. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue. He didn't even look angry. He simply placed his fork down slowly. And that was the moment no one realized would change everything. Because what Ozzy Osbourne was about to do next wasn't charity. It was something far more powerful. The manager stood there for a moment longer, making sure his authority had been felt. Then he adjusted his jacket, forced a smile for the nearby tables, and walked away as if nothing unusual had happened. The music resumed. Forks moved again, conversations restarted. Softer this time. But the atmosphere had changed. The waiter didn't meet anyone's eyes as he returned to the service station. His movements were slower now, mechanical. He wiped a spotless counter twice, then a third time just to keep his hands busy. From the corner of his eye, he glanced once toward Ozzy's table, then looked away, embarrassed. Ozzy remained seated, still and thoughtful. He observed everything, the way the manager laughed loudly with wealthy guests at another table, the way uneaten food was cleared away without a second thought, the way people dressed in luxury barely noticed the human beings serving them. This wasn't Ozzy's first time seeing places like this. Fame had shown him every version of wealth imaginable, but what always caught his attention wasn't money. It was how people treated those who had none. A server passed by with a tray stacked high with untouched dishes. Steak, bread, desserts barely sampled, all headed straight for the kitchen, and then the trash. Ozzy's jaw tightened, just slightly. At the service station, the waiter took a deep breath and checked his phone when he thought no one was watching. A cracked screen, one missed call. A message preview from earlier that day still visible. "Baba, did you eat today?" He closed the phone quickly, slipping it back into his pocket as another table called for service. "Yes, sir, right away," he said, forcing a smile. From his seat, Ozzy noticed. The waiter couldn't have been older than 30, dark circles under his eyes. The look of someone running on little sleep and too much responsibility. Not lazy, not careless, just tired. The manager's voice echoed again across the room. "Table 12 needs sparkling water. Not tap. Do I have to explain standards every night?" "Yes, sir," the waiter replied. Even though the mistake wasn't his, Ozzy finally lifted his hand. "Excuse me," he said calmly. The waiter froze for half a second before approaching again, fear flickering across his face. "Yes, sir. If there's a problem, there's no problem," Ozzy replied. Sit for a moment. The waiter looked around in panic. Sir, I'm not allowed to. I asked you, Ozzy said gently. Not loud, not commanding, just firm. The waiter hesitated because this dinner was no longer about food. It was about dignity. The manager noticed immediately. At first, it was just a flicker of irritation, a server sitting at a customer's table. That alone was enough to offend his sense of order. But when he recognized which customer it was, the irritation turned into something sharper, anger. He walked faster now, shoes clicking loudly against the marble floor, every step announcing authority. Nearby diners followed him with their eyes, sensing trouble the way animals sense a storm. What is this? The manager snapped, stopping beside the table. Why is my staff sitting with guests? The waiter jumped to his feet so quickly the chair scraped loudly. I'm sorry, sir, I didn't ask you. The manager said coldly, go back to work. Ozzy looked up slowly. His expression was calm, almost unreadable. I asked him to sit. The manager forced a polite smile, the kind meant for customers who didn't know their place. Sir, I appreciate your generosity, but this is not appropriate. Staff doesn't sit with guests. I'm not a guest, Ozzy replied evenly. The manager blinked. Excuse me, I said. Ozzy repeated. I'm not a guest. A few heads turned. The air tightened. The manager laughed lightly, dismissively. Sir, everyone dining here is a guest. That's how restaurants work. Ozzy leaned back slightly. Then why do you treat your staff like they don't belong here? The smile on the manager's face cracked. This is a business, he said sharply, not a place for emotional displays. My staff understands the rules. The waiter stared at the floor, his face burning. Every word felt like a spotlight on his shame. Ozzy's voice didn't rise. That somehow made it worse. Does he understand the rules? Ozzy asked. Or has he just learned to stay quiet? A woman at a nearby table shifted uncomfortably. A man cleared his throat. Phones appeared, subtly, discreetly. Screens tilted just enough to record. The manager noticed, his jaw tightened. Sir, he said through clenched teeth, if you're unhappy with the service, I can comp your meal. But interfering with my staff is unacceptable. Ozzy looked at the untouched plates on the table, then at the waiter. What's your salary? He asked. The waiter froze. Sir, I don't think I should. Answer him, the manager barked. There's nothing to hide. The waiter swallowed. Minimum wage, sir, plus tips when there are any. And how many hours a day? 12, sometimes 14. A murmur rippled through the room. The manager raised his voice. That's hospitality. If he doesn't like it, he's free to leave. Ozzy's eyes finally hardened. Free? He echoed quietly. Is a man free when his child waits at home for food? The manager scoffed. That's not my problem. Personal issues don't belong in my restaurant. The waiter clenched his fists. I didn't mean to cause trouble, he said quickly. Please, I'll leave if you want. Sit down, Ozzy said. 2. Simple words. The waiter hesitated, torn between fear and exhaustion. Slowly, he sat back down. The manager's face flushed red. Get up, he ordered. Now. No, Ozzy said. The room went dead silent. You don't tell me how to run my staff. The manager snapped. And you don't tell me, Ozzy replied, who deserves dignity. The manager leaned closer, lowering his voice into something poisonous. You think because you have money, you can play hero. Ozzy met his gaze without blinking. I think, he said, that money reveals who people already are. The manager straightened, furious now. Security, he called out loudly, escort this man and my employee out. The waiter's eyes widened. Sir, please, I need this job. Ozzy stood, not abruptly, not dramatically, just enough to shift the balance of the room. Every phone was up now. Ozzy reached into his pocket and placed his card gently on the table. You're right, he said. This is a business. He looked directly at the manager. And businesses answer to ownership. The manager laughed. Loud, sharp, arrogant. Ownership, don't be ridiculous. Ozzy nodded once. Then call them, he said calmly. Let's see who answers. For the first time that night, the manager felt it, that faint creeping doubt, and somewhere deep down, a fear he couldn't yet explain. For a moment, no one moved. The manager stared at Ozzy's card lying on the table as if it were a joke placed there to mock him. He didn't pick it up. He didn't need to. His pride wouldn't allow it. Ownership. The word echoed in his mind, irritating him like a mosquito he couldn't swat. He laughed again, louder this time, turning slightly so nearby tables could hear. "You really expect me to believe that?" he said. "Sir, I deal with wealthy people every night. Real owners don't dress like this." Ozzy didn't respond. That silence was doing more damage than any argument. 2 security guards appeared at the edge of the dining room, alerted by the manager's raised voice. They didn't step in yet. They waited watching. Just like everyone else. The waiter sat frozen, hands resting on his knees, knuckles pale. His heart pounded so loudly he was sure the people closest to him could hear it. "This is my fault," he whispered. "Sir, please, I didn't mean." Ozzy turned to him. "You didn't do anything wrong." The waiter's eyes burned. No one had said that to him in years. The manager snapped his fingers sharply. "Security," he said again. More impatient now. "I don't want a scene. Too late." A woman at the next table leaned toward her husband. "Is that Ozzy Osbourne?" she whispered. Her husband frowned. "No way." Another guest zoomed in on their phone, comparing the face at the table to something on their screen. Their eyes widened. The manager noticed the shift, the subtle change in the room's energy. He didn't understand it yet, but he felt it slipping out of his control. Ozzy finally spoke again. "Before you escort anyone out," he said calmly, "you might want to make a call." The manager sneered. "To whom?" Ozzy tapped the card lightly with his finger. "The number's there." The manager hesitated, just for half a second. Then he picked up the card. It wasn't flashy, no gold edges, no dramatic logo, just a simple name and a direct number. His smile faltered. He dialed. The phone rang once, twice. "Grandview Hospitality Group," a voice answered, polite, professional, alert. "Yes," the manager said loudly, making sure Ozzy could hear. "This is the floor manager at the Riverside location. I have a guest here making some unusual claims." There was a pause. The manager's posture stiffened. "Yes," he continued. "The name on the card. Ozzy Osbourne." The pause stretched longer this time. The waiter held his breath. Around them, the restaurant had gone completely quiet. No music, no laughter, just anticipation. "Yes," the manager said again, more slowly now. "He's here. In the dining room." His face drained of color. "Yes, I understand." Another pause. "Yes, I'll hold." The manager lowered the phone slightly, his hand trembling just enough to be noticeable. His confidence was gone, replaced by something brittle and panicked. "What did they say?" Someone whispered from a nearby table. The manager swallowed and put the phone back to his ear. "Yes," he said, "I understand, of course." He ended the call. For a long second he just stood there. Then he cleared his throat. "Sir," he said, his voice no longer sharp. "There seems to be a misunderstanding." Ozzy stood up fully now. The room felt smaller somehow, like the walls had leaned in. The manager tried again. "Perhaps we can discuss this privately." Ozzy shook his head gently. "Number this happened publicly." He turned to the room. "To everyone watching," he said evenly. "This man asked for permission to take food that would have been thrown away." A murmur rippled through the crowd. "He was embarrassed for caring about his child," Ozzy continued, "and punished for it." The manager opened his mouth, then closed it. Ozzy looked back at the waiter. "How many times have you gone home hungry so she could eat?" The waiter's voice cracked. "More times than I can count." That was it. Something broke. A woman wiped her eyes. A man shook his head slowly. Someone whispered, "That's shameful." The security guards shifted uneasily. One of them glanced at the manager, waiting for instructions that didn't come. Ozzy reached into his jacket. The room leaned forward as one, but instead of cash, he pulled out his phone. "I think," he said calmly, "it's time the owner came downstairs." The manager's knees nearly buckled. Because in that moment he understood. This wasn't about leftovers. This wasn't about rules. This was about exposure. And it was only just beginning. The room held its breath. Ozzy stood calmly, phone in hand while everyone else seemed frozen in place. The manager's earlier confidence had evaporated completely. His fingers twitched at his sides as if his body didn't know what to do without arrogance to hold it upright. "You don't need to do this," the manager said quietly, his voice barely steady. "We can resolve this." Ozzy looked at him. "We are resolving it." He tapped his screen once. Across the restaurant, the security guards straightened. One of them touched the earpiece in his ear, listening. His eyes flicked toward the entrance. Then, the front doors opened. Not dramatically. Not slammed, just opened. But the effect was electric. A tall man in a tailored suit walked in first, scanning the room. Behind him came a woman carrying a leather folder, her expression sharp and focused. Two more followed. Executives by the look of them. People who didn't wait to be welcomed. They walked with purpose, straight toward Ozzy. "Mr. Osbourne," the man said, stopping a few feet away. He nodded respectfully. "We didn't realize you were already dining. We were told you wanted to see us immediately." Every sound in the restaurant vanished. The manager's blood ran cold. "Mr. Osbourne?" He repeated weakly. "Yes," the woman said, opening the folder. "Majority shareholder. Board authority effective immediately." A phone slipped from someone's hand and clattered onto the floor. The manager staggered back half a step. That's impossible. I would have known." Ozzy finally spoke again. His voice steady, clear, unmistakable. "Would you?" he asked. "Or would you have treated me the same way either way?" The executives exchanged glances. "We received several internal reports," the man said carefully. "But none prepared us for this." Ozzy gestured gently toward the waiter. "This," he said, "is what your reports missed." The waiter stood there, shaking, eyes wide, unsure whether he was allowed to exist in this moment. The manager found his voice again, desperation leaking through it. "Sir, please, I didn't know who you were. If I had," Ozzy cut him off. "That," he said quietly, "is the problem." The words hit harder than shouting ever could. "You shouldn't need to know who someone is to treat them with dignity," Ozzy continued. "Respect shouldn't be unlocked by wealth." The manager's face collapsed. "I was just enforcing standards." Ozzy turned to the executives. "Are these your standards?" Silence. "No," the woman said firmly. "They are not." Ozzy nodded once. "Good." He turned back to the room. "I came here tonight to eat," he said. "I stayed because I saw something broken." People leaned in. Phones trembled in hands. "This man," Ozzy said, placing a hand lightly on the waiter's shoulder, "asked for food that would have been thrown away, and was punished for caring about his child." The waiter's eyes filled. He tried to speak, but nothing came out. Ozzy continued, his voice calm but unyielding, and this manager believed power meant humiliation. The manager dropped his gaze. Ozzy looked at the executives again. "I don't want apologies. I want change." The tall man nodded immediately. "Of course, effective now," Ozzy said. "He no longer represents this restaurant." A sharp intake of breath swept the room. The manager looked up, panic flooding his face. "Wait." The woman closed the folder. "Your access will be revoked by morning." The manager's knees buckled. He reached for the back of a chair to steady himself. Ozzy didn't watch him fall. Instead, he turned to the waiter. "What's your name?" he asked again gently. "Amir." The waiter whispered. "Amir," Ozzy said. "How long have you been invisible?" Amir shook his head, tears slipping down his face. "I didn't think anyone noticed." Ozzy met his eyes. "I noticed." He reached into his jacket and placed a document on the table. "Not money, not cash on offer. Starting tomorrow," Ozzy said. "You won't be asking for leftovers." The executives nodded. "You'll be eating with your daughter," Ozzy continued. "Without shame." The room erupted, gasps, whispers, muffled sobs. Someone began clapping. Then another, and another. Ozzy stepped back slightly, uncomfortable with the attention. "This isn't a performance," he said quietly. This is accountability. He turned toward the exit, behind him. The manager collapsed into a chair, the weight of every choice finally landing. As Ozzy walked away, one truth echoed through the room louder than applause. Power doesn't reveal itself in how you're treated. It reveals itself in how you treat others. The applause slowly faded, but the weight of the moment stayed. Ozzy paused near the exit, then turned back. Not for attention, but because something still needed to be finished. Justice wasn't just about removing power from the wrong hands. It was about placing it where it belonged. "Amir," he said gently. The waiter looked up, startled, as if he'd forgotten he was allowed to be addressed. "Yes, sir." Ozzy walked back to the table, not rushing, not dramatic. The room stayed silent, every eye following him. "You asked for leftovers because you were thinking about your daughter," Ozzy said. "Tell me something. How many times have you stayed quiet when you were treated unfairly?" Amir hesitated, then he answered honestly. "Every day." Ozzy nodded slowly. "That ends today." He turned to the executives. "I want him off the floor, not as punishment, as protection." The tall executive immediately responded. "Of course. We can place him on paid leave while—" "No," Ozzy interrupted softly. "Not leave." The executive paused. "Then?" Ozzy looked back at Amir. "How would you feel about training?" Amir blinked. "Training, sir. To supervise," Ozzy said. "To lead, you already understand service. What you haven't been given is authority." The woman with the folder smiled faintly. "We can start the process tonight." Amir's knees weakened. He grabbed the edge of the table, overwhelmed. I don't have experience," he whispered. Ozzy leaned closer. "Experience didn't make that man cruel," he said, glancing briefly toward the former manager. "Character did." The ex-manager sat silently now, staring at the floor. No phone, no voice. Just the echo of everything he'd dismissed for years. Ozzy straightened and addressed the room one last time. "This restaurant will stay open tonight," he said, "but things will be different." He gestured toward the untouched plates being cleared away. "From now on, no edible food is thrown out, ever." A murmur of approval spread. "Staff meals will be served with dignity," Ozzy continued, "and anyone who treats another human being as disposable, customer, or employee won't belong here." One of the security guards nodded quietly. Ozzy turned back to Amir. "Go home tonight," he said. "Eat with your daughter." Amir's voice broke. "Thank you." Ozzy shook his head. "You earned it." The executives began quietly issuing instructions, phones to ears, changes already in motion. The restaurant felt different now, lighter, as if something heavy had finally been lifted. As Ozzy walked toward the door again, Amir called out softly, "Sir?" Ozzy turned. "I just wanted leftovers," Amir said. "I never thought." Ozzy smiled, small and genuine. Most people who change the world don't ask for much. He opened the door. Cool night air rushed in. Behind him, the restaurant buzzed. Not with gossip, but with reflection. People spoke in hushed tones. Some wiped their eyes. Others stared at their plates, suddenly aware of how full they were. Amir stood taller than he had all night. The former manager stood alone. And Ozzy walked out quietly, exactly the way he had come in, without noise, without pride. But he left behind something far louder than applause. A standard. The restaurant slowly returned to motion, but nothing felt the same. People finished their meals more quietly now. Not because the food had changed, but because they had. Every bite carried a thought that hadn't been there before. Across the room, Amir stood near the service station, no longer invisible. Staff members spoke to him differently now, with curiosity, with respect, some with guilt. He checked his phone. A new message blinked on the cracked screen. "Baba, did you bring food?" Amir smiled through tears. "Yes," he typed back. "And something better." Outside, Ozzy walked down the street alone, hands in his pockets. The city lights reflecting quietly in his eyes. No cameras, no speech, no need for applause. He had seen this story before. Just with different faces. People often asked him why he stayed quiet when insulted, why he didn't announce who he was, why he waited. Because the truth was simple. If respect only shows up after status, then it was never respect to begin with. Inside the restaurant, a woman leaned toward her teenage son. "Did you see that?" she whispered. "That's what real power looks like." The boy nodded slowly, eyes fixed on the door Ozzy had walked through. "He didn't shout," he said. "He didn't threaten anyone." "No," the woman replied. "He didn't need to." At another table, a businessman pushed his untouched dessert away. He suddenly remembered the janitor he ignored every morning, the delivery driver he never thanked, the waiter whose name he never bothered to read. Power had always been loud in his world. Tonight, it had been silent. The former manager sat alone, the weight of his choices settling in without distraction. No audience now, no authority to hide behind, just a mirror he could no longer look away from. Ozzy never looked back. He didn't need to. Because the lesson wasn't about him. It was about the moment every person faces. When they believe no one important is watching. When kindness feels optional. When arrogance feels justified. When another human being feels small, that's when character speaks. Not in words, in choices. Amir would go home that night and eat with his daughter. Tomorrow, he would return not as someone who begged, but as someone trusted. And the people who witnessed it would carry the moment longer than they expected into other restaurants. Other offices, other ordinary days where someone quietly asks for dignity. Because respect isn't something you give when it's safe. It's something you show when it costs you nothing. And sometimes, everything. If you were Ozzy, would you have stayed silent? Or would you have stood up? Type if you believe kindness is real strength. Type respect if no one should have to beg for dignity. And tell me, where are you watching from? I want to thank every kind soul personally. Because the world doesn't change from grand speeches. It changes from moments like this, quiet, human, unforgettable.